Hopefully you can all hear us, which is great to see. Obviously, I've got with me Laura in the room, which is great news. Have we got Tommy?
Yeah. Tommy, if you could. Oh no, sorry. Tommy from Bernardo's has unfortunately had to drop out as he's unwell.
That's fine. And Laura, is it Laura?
Laura's also had to drop out.
Laura, all pressure on Laura. Oh no, sorry, Caroline as well.
And Caroline.
Caroline, I see Caroline's video. Perfect. Hey, Caroline, how are you?
I'm fine. I was getting slightly panicked because no one was connecting me, and I was thinking, have I done something wrong?
No. Well, first of all, apologies for the delay. So we had to constitute the APPG. So there's now a rule about 8 parliamentarians supposed to be present for it to be constituted. I was delayed because I was in a delegated legislation about hedgerows in Committee Room 9, which I'm now free from. And so we can obviously begin. I am going to begin my apologies and asking our great supporters, our secretariat. They will have to take over and chair for me at 3:20 or 3:25. I can push it to, because some events may have occurred during Prime Minister's questions today, which means I'm now being rolled out onto broadcast TV to talk about them and why we're sticking to the plan. So you'll appreciate I'm going to have a lot of fun in the next hour of my life. But this is more important, of course, because as we now know, we've reconstituted, so we have still the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Apprenticeships. I'm delighted that Charlotte's going to be continuing, so an apologies from her that she's not able to be here for this section of the meeting. We're grateful that she was there for us to be quorate, because ultimately it is so important. This is a very, I think this is going to be one of the hot topics, to be perfectly frank, of the upcoming election. I think that political parties are going to put a lot of emphasis, and I think actually there's probably more agreement than disagreement. It's all about the sort of the 10-15% that always people haggle over in terms of where we want to see things improve. And I hope, therefore, we'll see the Prime Minister did make some moves in the right direction. I like to think that was partly down to pressure from our APPG cross-party report, which some of those measures were adopted, as well as, of course, pressure from parliamentarians across the floor, and most importantly, the sectors itself, business itself, have been trying to feed in some of the barriers and challenges to making sure that we can actually create more and more apprenticeships. I think are certainly the future of our country, and certainly will be if we want to unlock the skills agenda to its fullest potential in the nation. But what we're here for today is very important. We're here for the third sector and third sector apprenticeships. And ultimately, let's be quite frank, the third sector are being asked to do more and more than it ever has done before. I see that with my own local organisations like Middleport Matters Community Trust, the Hub Foundation, now part of Port Vale FC's for Community Trust. And essentially, as more and more pressure is being piled onto local authorities, and I do accept money is not always followed anywhere near the same amount as it was done with the responsibilities, that means the third sector has had to come in and cover a large gap in that market space to make sure particularly disadvantaged young people and elderly people are getting the opportunities to access the skills, the opportunities and the support that they need in this important time. So what I want to make sure we do today is learn about those pressures, because they do, in my opinion, have the ability in apprenticeships to transform. And so what I thought we'd do is, first of all, allow if we can, Laura to introduce herself and a bit about who she's here for, and then Caroline, we'll come to you to ask you to introduce yourself too, and just a bit about yourself. So Laura, over to you first of all.
The introduction.
Yeah, please, yeah, just for now, then we'll come back to more stuff.
So I'm Laura Thurlow, and I work with JGA, which is an independent training provider, and my particular role at JGA is to support voluntary sector organisations to access our apprenticeships.
Perfect. And Caroline.
Hi, my name is Caroline Noon. I'm Apprenticeship Manager at the National Trust, so I look after everything and anything to do with apprenticeships, setting them up, running them, creating them, organising them, anything and everything really. That's me.
Perfect. So we have the experts, we have the people that know how. So if I start with you, Laura, first of all, if you want to just introduce us, talk us through what you're seeing in the market space, and of course the goods, the bad, the ugly, and everything that we could do here as parliamentarians to try and assist you in what you're trying to do.
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting JGA to be part of the meeting today. Until 3 years ago, I was actually a charity chief executive, and so I was responsible for recruiting staff, and in some cases apprenticeships could have been entirely appropriate. Also learning and development opportunities for existing staff to invest in existing members of the team, and again apprenticeships could have been a great option, but sadly in my case apprenticeships was not something that was on my radar at the time. I did get back in touch with the charity concerned and flag it to them. But I think that's one of the challenges, just as you say, with the sector being asked to do so much more and being stretched having the chance to actually find out about the opportunity that apprenticeships afford. So for the last 3 years, I've been at JGA, an independent training provider founded back in 1991. So I've been providing vocational training for over 30 years, helping people to develop positive futures. We're really proud that we achieved our Queen's Award for Enterprise for promoting opportunity, and were particularly recognised for creating supportive environments to enable diverse learners to progress and to succeed. So as I said, my role at JGA is very much focused on the voluntary sector and enabling them to access our apprenticeship programmes. We have a range of programmes which are entirely relevant for the sector. So we have a full suite of marketing and communications apprenticeships, digital, fundraising, which I just think is a fantastic recognition that a career in fundraising is recognised by having its own apprenticeship. And many people I talk to say that they wish it was around when they were starting out in fundraising. We also have a policy apprenticeship, events, and obviously others. So a range of levels from level 3 all the way up to master's degree level, level 7. And we are really proud of our high success rates, our high achievement rates. So our marketing executive apprenticeship, for example, we have an 88% achievement rate compared to the national average of 60%. And on our fundraising programme, 86% compared to the national average of 70%. So we have just under 100 apprentices, 96 apprentices from the charity sector. We obviously also work with corporates and also public sector clients. And our charity clients include larger international, national charities who are paying the apprenticeship levy. And obviously they're very much motivated to utilise the opportunity that's available and maximise that opportunity, in fact. What I find in some of those larger charities is, however, when it gets to the department manager level, line manager level, there can be some challenges around actually take up of the opportunity. So while I'm naturally sort of talking to apprenticeship leads and HR contacts, and then making it available to teams, sometimes there's a drop off from what they might expect, and all sorts of reasons for that. Some of the concerns around time commitment, juggling obviously doing an apprenticeship around the workload. And then we have non-levy paying clients, so smaller charities for whom the concerns and the challenges can be slightly different. For some of them, it's just purely just grasping how it all works, the practicalities and having an apprentice, particularly if it's the first time that they've thought about it, going through the regulations and what's required. We have had smaller, sort of particularly small charities who just haven't practically had the capacity to proceed with apprenticeships, which has been a shame. And recently, sadly, we had one charity that's been forced to close, the smaller charity, and make their current apprentices redundant. So we're working really hard with them to seek another charity employer so they can continue the programme. So I think the cost challenges and charity budgets continues to be a strain, particularly on smaller charities, and can sometimes be that hurdle. We have successfully signposted some of our clients and supported them to secure levy transfer, which has been really positive. And in some cases, we've also been happy to accept payment by instalments of the 5% employer contribution, where that's been helpful for smaller charities. And we provide, I personally provide quite a lot of support to our clients, as I say, especially to those charities for whom apprenticeships are something new that they've not done before. Just talking them through, providing them with help all along the way, and trying to keep sort of clear, simple information about how it all works. So we have produced some tailored information that we provide, particularly for voluntary sector audience. We also have worked with some other partners, for example, Charity People, a recruitment agency, to produce video content and other resources to, in some ways, demystify apprenticeships, but also to sort of raise awareness amongst the charity sector. So that's been really positive. And there are some great resources that I regularly signpost clients to. The funding and apprenticeship website with the sort of little calculator where they can work out specifically for them what the cost would be is particularly helpful. The Department for Education has some YouTube videos which just talk through step by step how to register with the apprenticeship service, for example. And obviously the gov.uk website has some really helpful guidance. But in terms of what more could potentially be done to unlock apprenticeships for the sector, I think potentially there is a role to sort of draw lots of the resources and information that are available into one pooled resource and make that just much more easily accessible for charities, particularly those smaller charities that are a bit more time poor, and just sort of simplifying what can be a bit of a challenge to find the relevant information in lots of different places. And the other thing I would say is just generally more communication, wider communication about the opportunity of apprenticeships for the sector. The fact that there's such a range, different levels that are available, literally hundreds of jobs where an apprenticeship can provide individuals with the competence to be really good at that job. And I think also there's a role for charities that are already successfully employing and placing existing staff onto apprenticeships, just to share their story, to share their positive experiences. No doubt they do that internally very well, but what more can we do collectively to share those stories publicly? And you know, both apprentices themselves and line managers of their experience, and that might just help to overcome some of those barriers that others encounter. And potentially a sort of a development on from that could be linking charities together, so charities that are further down the road, linking them with charities that are just starting out. So just a few ideas.
No, amazing, and thank you so much for those. I particularly was enjoying what you were saying about the completion rates, 88 and 86%, I think, rates that you mentioned there, and actually the positives of the levy transfer, but understanding is always communication of these things and how to get the message out there being a huge challenge, as well as interesting about sort of, is it senior management or middle management that there was the kind of the drop off in take up? Was it
Both, I think, yeah.
Both. How again, I would have probably presumed that was actually where it was strongest take up, and maybe at the sort of the bottom end, or the low, you know, level 3 level, that would have been more hard to get people to do it. So I was intrigued to hear those barriers, and again, do understand though that people talking about time commitments and stuff like that, and what can be done in that space. Thurlow, please do share with us your ideas and your experiences.
Okay, I put together a presentation just as it's a bit easier to talk through because I'm not in the room. So if that's okay, I'll share my screen.
Please do.
So, yeah, as mentioned before, my name is Caroline Noon. I'm apprenticeship manager at the National Trust. If I look to the side, I apologise. It's because I've got 2 screens, and so I'm trying to coordinate all the different information at the same time. So, the first thing is, what does my role entail? So, as apprenticeship manager at the National Trust, I started at the Trust in January 2018. So I've been there just over 6 years. My role is about leading and developing and growing our apprenticeship programme. So we've grown from 8 in 2016, before I started, before the levy, to over 225 on programme. And I'm a bit of a geek. I worked it out. That's an increase of 2,712%, which is quite a nice figure to be able to quote at senior managers within the organisation. My role is to optimise and utilise the levy where possible. So some areas are much easier than others, such as gardens, we're really famous for, rangers, but areas such as collections, looking after the items in our houses, is much trickier, where there are routes that are still in development. Sometimes they haven't got off the ground, and that's quite frustrating for us as an organisation. I support and often lead in the development of review of new apprenticeship programmes. So across a range of disciplines, I aim to have an expert from the Trust on as many trailblazers as I possibly can, so we can help shape the content and make sure that we can use them and give them as options for people. I provide subject matter expertise both internally and externally. So I participate and lead in a number of networking groups to share ideas. So I'm part of the Apprenticeship Diversity Network, the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network. I run my own network. I was on the Genie programme run by Amazing Apprenticeships. So there's lots of different people I link into, and I often mentor my equivalents in smaller charities, for example, as well. And I'm always happy to do that. And I launch and refine and evaluate the schemes to ensure that they meet the needs of the organisation. For example, we've recently changed the way that recruit, removing CVs from the application process. And we also introduced national living wage a couple of years ago. Previously, we paid national minimum wage, and that has had a real impact on what we can offer. So how have our apprenticeships grown? So as mentioned, it was only 8 in 2016. We did have some small internal programmes with regards to gardens and rangers, but they weren't apprenticeships. but it was really good to say that we should have potentially, we'll have even more on programme by the end of 2024. It's looking quite good despite the current economic climate. Prior to the introduction of a levy, like I said, we did have a few internal courses, but nothing particularly much. Typically, 60% of our roles are generously funded by donation. This does vary from area to area. So, for example, this year, 100% of our horticultural apprenticeship roles are funded by various donations and legacies, which we're very lucky and very grateful for. We're able to offer routes to existing staff to upskill in their role, as well as hiring in new starters. The majority of the roles we have are level 2 to 4, so we tend to buck the national trend, which I'm really proud of as well, because I know that those levels have really gone down. It means we can create many more entry routes into the trust, which increases our representation across the communities where we're located, especially as a lot of our properties, I think 87% of National Trust properties are in rural locations, and the majority, I think over 90% of people live in urban environments. So there's a bit of a mix of where our properties are. But that allows us to also expand the age profile, creating entry routes in diversity and wider inclusion. So far, we've supported 69 different routes across England, Wales and Northern Ireland since my sort of records started in sort of 2017. And currently we have 28 different routes live, and we'll have placed apprentices in over 200 locations by this October, when our sort of next round of new starters all come in, which I'm always really excited about, the different locations. We have so many locations at the National Trust, though, that I suppose that doesn't, it's not surprising that there's that many. So some of the things, so we have a low dropout rate of 8.3% for our new starters, which I was really quite surprised when I worked it out compared to the national average. And so I was thinking about some of the things that we do as an organisation to help that. So we have a robust recruitment process. So sites have to apply to host and have to meet minimum criteria to support an apprentice. So we place them in the right locations to start with. Like I mentioned before, we've removed CVs from the process. So that tends to help those from a lower socioeconomic background. We've been really clear about the eligibility criteria, because we were tending to get a lot of people who were overqualified applying. So now we're directing them into the right locations. So, for example, we found that between 50 and 75% of the people applying for garden roles would be suitable for another role, that maybe like a grade 10 or a grade 9 role, but they weren't applying. So if a site advertised an apprentice, we might get 100 people apply, and if they advertise a grade 10, they might get 5 apply. So we're trying to match that one up a little bit as well. And we're also limiting the number of applications, because we found that when people applied for 10 or 20 roles, which people seriously do, they didn't tend to perform as better as the people that applied for a few. So we've limited the number that they can apply for. And this is helping us to select great candidates. And I think that really helps with that retention. We ensure that all apprentices have a dedicated mentor that's allocated before they start, who will support through the whole programme. And we do, line managers do regular check-ins to help keep the apprentices on track, know where they are in the programme. And then my apprenticeship team will support line managers and mentors and give them guidance in their roles. And my team also we set up dedicated chat groups for all our apprentices. This allows contact for both line managers, mentors and apprentices. And the support starts from the moment the site is selected to host, through advertising, selecting and induction. And we also make sure we ask for feedbacks from apprentices, and we do visits to block weeks if they're going to block, so that they know who we are and they know who we can contact. And we also try to offer other activities that will widen their experience and build on those knowledge, skills and behaviours. So, for example, on a Chelsea week, we've got apprentices manning the stand. We've had them involved in the build-up, and they'll be involved in the replanting of the National Trust garden at the Blue Diamond location up in Manchester. We do act on feedback and make changes as required, such as we'll change the training providers if needed, if they don't perform. We show that we listen to our apprentices and we act on what is shared. So I have changed providers on a number of occasions. But we also, to try and mitigate that, I work really closely with training providers to ensure we offer good quality content and we hold them to account. And we'll be starting to do our own independent checks. One of my team was a quality assessor at a college previously, so she's going to train up the rest of the team to be able to deliver those quality checks, which I think is really good from our point of view. And we've also worked with providers to try and minimise the entry criteria where possible. So what is the lowest grade that we can advertise with? So so we can widen the number of people that can apply. And we also encourage sites to retain apprentices on completion. It isn't always possible, but we can, if they are unable to retain someone, we also guarantee interviews for all our level 2 apprentices if they apply for a grade 10 role. So that we found now that if we get those apprentices in front of hiring managers, they're more likely to hire them as well. And then we continuously review and look to see where we can improve. So we're doing a lot, but we can always do more. And that's the really key thing for me. The other area, I think if I just go, yeah, that's my final slide. The other area that I wanted to talk about is, from our point of view, what are the policy recommendations? So I think it would be really great if we could utilise the levy to cover additional unavoidable costs. Where we're sending apprentices to college, for example, there is cost for accommodation and travel if those programmes are on a block replacement model. That can range, if we have to put apprentices in hotels, like where we have like carpentry and joinery apprentices, for example, that can be upwards of £750 a week. And if they have 12 block weeks, it's an astronomical amount of money. We're mindful if stuff is paid for by donation about using that money widely, but also it limits the number of places that we potentially can afford to host because of those additional costs. So if that was something we could utilise the levy for, I think that would be able to open us up many more options to be able to offer more places. I think as well, reviewing the functional and essential skill criteria. The current requirements are making it harder for those groups that may benefit the most from completing or even enrolling on an apprenticeship. It's the reason why many apprentices can't complete, as where they may be competent at enroll, but they just can't pass that assessment. And I think that's a really important consideration. Like I say, we give them a lot of support to get through that functional skills, but some providers don't even want to take on apprentices that don't have sort of lower grades at GCSE because they're worried about their completion stats. So I think it creates a bit of a false environment. I think it would also be useful to review the EPA assessment methods. How could they support groups that may struggle with multiple choice exams, for example? Could we have more evaluation more focused on success? And if someone isn't confident to talk in front of others, how can we help them to showcase those KSBs that they've learnt better to give them more opportunities? I think that could also make a difference. So we've had very limited numbers. I think since I've been here, we've enrolled about 500 and less than 5 haven't passed. And 2 of them because they couldn't get their functional skills, and one of them that I can remember off the top of my head was because they just could not pass the multiple choice. They took it 5 times and then gave up, yet they were absolutely brilliant. It's a real shame. And I think also make the process to develop new apprenticeship routes quicker. A typical trailblazer group, and we've invested sometimes in having like a chair in the secretariat with the best will in the world, tends to take about 18 months. So what could we do to speed up that process? Because I think if you can make the process that bit faster, you stand more chance of getting more standards through and more people enrolling. So that's sort of, I'll stop sharing, hopefully. That's come back. So hopefully that answers, sort of covers off quite a lot of the things that I said I was really interested in sort of sharing with the group, really.
Actually, if you want
I can play Member of Parliament as best I can. Hi, it's Caroline, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, I'm Jonathan, Senior Parliamentary Researcher. He's now off voting. We don't actually have any other members in here to now open the floor up to questions.
There are some questions
In the pack, let me ask some questions. I found it quite interesting you were talking about functional skills, because we've done some stuff on functional skills, and I think the grievances we've kind of been discussing are that in some cases, if you're doing an apprenticeship and you, even in the case if you have a degree, and you can't find your O-level GCSEs, even as far as O-level certificates, you can't get some kind of funding for apprenticeships. So I suppose you'd probably agree with us that removing the functional skills requirement, particularly in cases where you might already have qualifications that outstrip or outweigh like a C in maths and English, would probably be quite useful.
I think so. I mean, we haven't had it. I suppose we've had a few different scenarios. I did have someone who was doing a level 7 senior leaders apprenticeship, and she actually said that completing the functional skills level 2 maths felt like a bigger achievement because she'd avoided maths all of her life. But I do think sometimes it can be quite daunting, and we do sometimes have apprentices who may consider dropping out because it feels too much. I sometimes wonder as well whether it would be, if we're looking at an option of maybe offering functional skills as a separate thing to people on an apprenticeship, so they could build up those functional skills separately and then apply for the apprenticeship as those internal upskillers. But I think it could potentially limit the number of people. And it's, if someone is able to demonstrate all those knowledge, skills and behaviours and they're deemed to be competent in the role, it just seems an absolute tragedy that they can't enter their EPA and pass their apprenticeship because they've got something that isn't actually a requirement. So not sure whether it should be totally removed, because I think it's a good thing, but I think it shouldn't be a deal breaker on whether they can progress.
Fantastic. And you had really high completion rates. So we actually have an apprentice in our office, and I'm her line manager, and I can be candid and say at times she's very, very difficult to manage. And it might be the case she's not on track to complete her apprenticeship. Why are your completion rates, or why do you think your completion rates are typically higher than on average? I'll go to Laura first, and then to Caroline.
Okay.
I think there'll be a number of reasons for that.
Yeah.
We do provide a lot of support to every apprentice as they go through the programme. So our skills coaches meet with them every 4 to 6 weeks. And if, as you say, if they are potentially not on track, that does get flagged quite quickly, and there's support and extra help available to keep them on track. We encourage line managers as well to come along to those progress review meetings, so that everybody's on the same page in terms of where that individual apprentice is at, and supporting them to successfully get through the programme.
And Caroline?
I think for us, it comes back to some of the stuff that I said, is that we do quite a lot of investment up front to make sure that we're placing those apprentices in a good site. So much so that, like, now I will get a like I've just had one site where we've agreed to fund an apprenticeship and they can host it, but they've got a few changes and they've come back and said, we don't feel that it's the right time for us. So it's sort of moving them away from thinking, oh, well, I've got this role, it's funded, I need to have it, to actually, I don't think I can do as good a job as I should. And then when they're on the programme, we put in regular sessions to check in with the apprentices. We get feedback from them and we check in with the line managers. We also now say the line managers have to do regular reviews. We make sure they ideally would, if they're going to a college, that they've gone to the college, that they've seen it, that they're aware of what the content of that knowledge, skills and behaviours element of the apprenticeship is, and that they can put that stuff in place to support that individual. So I think it is that sort of, building on what was said before, it's that sort of holistic approach, really, that I think everybody needs to be invested in it. You know, it's I think it's not just down to the apprentice to go and find that stuff. The manager's got to want to help them. Their mentors got to be invested. The organisation's got to be prepared to support them. You know, we want to give them every opportunity we can to be successful. In an ideal world, we're producing the rangers, the gardeners, the IT professionals of the future. So why would we not invest in them properly? And I think if I don't feel that a site is supporting that individual as well as they should, then I will place them in another site. If I don't think the apprentice is performing as well as they should, one of the things we say to line managers is you have those regular checks, and they need to go through the standard performance management process and help to get that individual back on track. So it doesn't happen in isolation. All those different cogs, I think, have to work together.
Right. And don't quote me if I'm wrong, but the levy transfer has been extended from 25% to 50%. Is that the case? The announcement the government introduced a few weeks ago. Am I completely wrong on that?
It went up.
It went up. Did it go up by that much, or am I wrong on the numbers? Okay. And to what extent do you think that might support small and medium-sized and businesses in accessing that unspent levy funding?
Yeah, it definitely helps. I mean, of the smaller charities, it definitely makes a difference to them proceeding. I think there's been some conversation in the chat already about the apprenticeship hubs. And so there's work to do, and they're great examples of kind of brokering those that can pledge their levy to be available to be transferred, and then obviously smaller charities that can benefit from that. And it's great to have that support and help available to bring the two together and simplify it as much as possible.
Anything from you on that one, Caroline, or anyone else?
We haven't done any levy transfer, and we don't spend all of our levy. But I think it's one for me. I think it's my focus has been trying to get apprenticeships up and running for us. And there's been rumblings about potentially the amount of levy that you can spend going forwards might be reduced. And so, although my role is to optimize and utilize the levy, when there was the potential option of that amount that we could use being reduced, I've been sort of told to rein it back in. So there's sort of a lot of myths around levy spend. I also think the process, I know organisations that do that levy transfer, it's almost like a whole separate team that do it to make sure that, because if we were to transfer a levy, we'd need to make sure that it was with like organisations potentially that have the same value as us and have those kind of other aspects that we would want it, that is like more of a partnership, and that all takes time. So I think it's with all things, it's about trying to make sure that it's done well. And I think the process, it's not, from when I looked at it previously, and I don't really have capacity to look at the moment because of the size of my team, but I think it's about making it needs to be quite a smooth and simple process, and I'm not sure it's always the case. And it's quite hard with the levy, because when you're trying, like for me, when I'm trying to predict my spend, because like if a program is 18 months, then you have to have a certain amounts taken out of completion fee, a certain amounts taken out for the endpoint assessment fee, then a certain amount, then the remainder is divided over the duration of the apprenticeship. And if I'm trying to work out how much levy I've actually got that I would have to be able to transfer versus what I need to put for my program predicted going forwards, that's actually also quite tricky. So I think from my point of view, if there was a more effective online tracker that would allow me to predict my spend going forwards and what was left over, I think that would be really helpful. And I know there was a sort of online tracker a bit that worked on the DAS account, but it only really worked as you kept putting your information in, and it sort of stopped in a certain point in the future. So it didn't really make it viable for me. So I think it's quite complicated to work out unless you're a whiz on Excel, which I'll be honest, I'm not particularly.
And last question for me, this again, I think is more for Caroline. I think I recall you saying that you've got a higher number of level 2 and 4 apprentices, and obviously I think there's a drop off in lower level take ups from marginalised groups. Why do you think you're able to attract people on the lower end of the level qualifications?
I think what I've always been really keen to do is have a pyramid, and so we have more junior roles at the trust. So our lower grades, there's more people at those lower grades by a natural rate of progression in an organisation. As you get more senior in the organisation, there's fewer roles. So by that nature, if we tend to try to sort of map apprenticeships into where they would go, and so logically, we're never going to we should never, in my opinion, have more level 7 apprentices than we do have level 2 apprentices. That doesn't make sense. So it's always sort of like that pyramid going up. We only recruit currently externally level 2 to 4, and we made a decision about that because it creates, we do offer apprenticeships up to level 7 as upskilling for existing staff, but it becomes quite complicated to try and work out where we fit the salary for those individuals, because I play all level 2, 3 and 4s have a set rate of salary that's fixed. So it becomes slightly more challenging. But I also was very keen that one of the typically, historically for the National Trust, our employees tended to be probably 35 to 50 white middle class. And it's not so much now because we've got lots of different routes in. But apprenticeships, if you're targeting those sort of level 2s and 3s and 4s, mainly 2s and 3s, you're creating entry routes in. So by that very nature, you're always going to increase your diversity and inclusion because you're widening the net. I mean, apprenticeships are open to all levels now, and we do get people apply from all ages. This year, I've noticed especially a large amount of graduates that are applying for our programs. But I think by making sure that we always have larger numbers. So if I just think about our roles that we've got advertised, I've just advertised for 17 level 2s and 4 level 3s, and I've got another 20 level 2s going live in 2 weeks' time. You know, so 4 of my new starters, 40 of them are level 2 and 4 of them are level 3. It's really about just creating those opportunities, really. I think if you do that, and then that starts, and so now I'm sort of working, that's feeding in. So we also try to make sure we have enough roles that will link into natural wastage and natural turnover within the organisation. So potentially we may get 20 or 30 people that retire or change roles every year. So if we have 20 garden placements, the very likelihood is that they'll get a role at the end as well. So it's really about sort of bringing that pipeline of staff in and then using the higher levels of apprenticeships potentially to upskill people moving forwards.
I've got no further questions.
May I ask a quick one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you go first.
Yeah.
Richard Goodwin, I work with Laura, and I just want to come back to the functional skills question. And I think one of the challenges generally with apprenticeships is a lot of other things get lumped in with the actual training for the job. And they're all understandable. So if I walk down the street and say, should an apprentice have a decent standard of English? Everyone's going to say yes. Should they have a decent standard? Yes. Should they know how to protect themselves online? And should they know what to do if the person sitting next to them is in danger of radicalisation? And you end up with a lot of others. You end up with a list as long as your arm of stuff which actually isn't training for the job. It's all things that individually are well worth doing, but the complexity it adds to the programs make it much tougher. And you get people, for example, who can't finish because they can't do the maths functional skills or because of the particular format of a test. But a lot of it is things that you can understand why it's been added on, but the implementation of that complexity just makes the apprenticeship more difficult for everybody concerned. But you absolutely understand why people think people should have a decent standard of English and a decent standard of maths and everything else. So I guess the challenge is to find ways to ensure a decent standard without the hard barrier that functional skills sometimes presents.
Yeah, because you could argue that you need CPR training, you're right, you need your driving license, everything, but well, where does the line stop? You had a question?
Yes, yeah, so forgive me if I've already mentioned this. Obviously there's been talk about reforming the spending levy and basically bringing other training within that. Would that devalue value apprenticeships, do you think, or do you think that's a benefit to expand the ways in which you can spend the levy?
I do talk to charities that they're looking to train staff in areas where at the moment there isn't an apprenticeship route. So I could definitely see the value of that. Whether it would devalue apprenticeships, I'm not sure.
In a way that the money's diverted away from funding those apprenticeships in favour of in one sense, the easier option. The providers will go, well, we could do those easy 2-week training courses rather than, you know, the year-long apprenticeship route. It's not saying it's cop out, but it's an easier route.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully there is space for the diversity of
But fundamentally, if you are in a corporate and you say, I want somebody trained on something, what you as an employer are looking for is the shortest possible course that packs the most punch for the least amount of effort cost, although that's probably secondary and other things. With an apprenticeship and with other government funded training, a lot of the inputs are specified. So there must be 20% off the job time. It must last more than a year. And this is actually doing the opposite of what an organisation would generally do if it was looking for very specific training for a staff member. So it is a completely different way of looking. Well, how it would be implemented in terms of using levy for other things is up in the air. I don't think anybody really knows. And the devil, as always, will be in the detail. I mean, from our commercial interests, of course, we're on the register of training providers, and I'm quite happy to do policy officer apprenticeships or marketing or whatever it happens to be, but on a shorter format. But the alternative is you then throw it out to all sorts of different courses, which you could argue is fine, but then the government loses the things they value, like people should have a decent standard English and maths and safeguarding and all the rest of it. So the devil will be in the detail, but clearly the way government funded training, particularly apprenticeships, are run now is very, very different to how corporates would, and you talk charities as well, would generally look for training if they were paying. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is your view on it, but it is how it is, I think it's fair to say.
Okay. I have no further questions. Anyone else? Any questions on the link?
I'd like to add something about with regards to using apprenticeship funds for other things. I personally think that the process of making sure that there is money ring-fenced for apprenticeships is really good. I think if there were incentives to encourage different groups, that would be a challenge. So if you had higher incentives to hire under 18s or under 25s, there's that under under 19 category at the moment. But actually, if there was more, if it was a bigger incentive to be able to do that, then you can actually use that as evidence to target your recruitment without facing rules around age discrimination. If you want to create more opportunities for young people, give the tools to support it. But I don't think you should water down the apprenticeship. Like for us, it would be really useful if we could use the levy, excuse me, to cover off things like the accommodation and the travel. But I wouldn't want to use it for other things that aren't apprenticeships. Like there was this talk about trying to do much shortened apprenticeship for upskillers. And then like if an apprenticeship has been designed to be 18 months long, you shouldn't try to do it in 6 months. So I think they're different things. And I think it's really important not to sort of muddy the waters. So if it was going to be used for other things, it should be other things within the apprenticeship. So maybe, for example, if someone does need functional skills, it should be a separate standalone course that has its own start and finish duration and doesn't have to run alongside. I don't think it should be used for different things. I think there should be a different pot set aside for different things.
Fantastic. I think we're good.
Not got any more questions online? Unmute, raise their hands, be a little brave.
Well, I guess just leaving us to thank everyone so much for coming. Sorry, you had a researcher rather than an MP finishing up your session, but if you have any further questions or want to get in touch with Jonathan, I'll get these guys to leave my details and Jonathan's details with you. And yeah, I hope you all have a good rest of your afternoon, and thanks so much for coming again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Caroline. It was really interesting to hear about the work at the National Trust.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to share my stories. Hopefully get my voice back.
Oh, bless you. You did remarkably well. Are you feeling poorly?
No, not at all. I think I've just got hay fever.
Oh.
So sorry, I'm just going to end this meeting just to give the room back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.